uses of water which aren't necessarily efficient, and then someone can apply for that, get that consent, and then transfer it off with the land or separately to another site even, at no cost and often without any great restrictions in the relevant regional plans on such transfers. And that's what happened down in the Ashburton situation.
Yeah, which we've talked about many a time. Philip Milne, thank you very much for that. And you would think that public annoyance will put a stop to transferable consents and such. You'd think that we're going to find a way through this eventually. Now, there is something I want to ask. We have short thoughts on the panel now, opinions and topics, suggestions, and our Vox Pop app is downloadable from the iTunes Store or the Google Play Store. Here is Steve, who's a listener in Japan, and he's living in Osaka.
I'd like to hear why we get more frustrated, more angry, more upset, and more senile as we get older.
Right. We can probably leave the senility out of it.
Yes.
But the rest is interesting. Michael, why do you get more angry and more frustrated?
Well, I vacillate a little bit. I mean, I think there's a number of factors to it. You know, you suddenly become aware of the fact you've got less time than you thought you had in the first instance. So with less time, you think, I've got to make that time work effectively, and if this isn't working effectively, then I get grumpy. So that's part of it. Secondly, I think as you age, you get kind of, nothing works quite as efficiently as it did before in terms of your own self, and so that sets it up in a sort of grumpy sort of way. And I think there is a greater sense of entitlement that you have when you believe you are, through dint of age, cleverer than everybody else that exists around you. So I think there's a number of factors in that, most of which are ill-founded and of little value in a general sense. I actually, personally, try not to be that thing because the thing that you should have as you age is actually the sense and the wisdom to understand that no, life isn't going to go quite according to plan all the time, and that people are generally trying their best, and so you should be a little bit more zen about it. The senility thing, I think, is actually, metabolic, and we may not be able to get to the bottom of why that would be. It should be, if I'm trying to be Pollyanna about this, it should be that as we age, we actually set the very best example rather than the worst of examples.
It should be. It should be. But recent research I saw in the Huffington Post says more men suffer from grumpy old man syndrome when they hit 70. That may be a journalist interviewing the keyboard. Now, I can't really ask you...
But that is generally because we absolutely, as we get to that age, men do have a greater sense of entitlement anyway. So as we age, that just gets amplified, I would have
Brodie,
thought.
What have you observed?
Oh, look, I as at the tender age of 30, I don't know if this is my area of expertise.
No, it's not.
You fall into almost none of the democratic characteristics.
I get really angry and frustrated, but I just think that it's because I'm a really passionate person.
There are a lot of grumpy young people as well as...
There are a lot of grumpy young people.
That is true.
And they'll stay grumpier longer.
I know, and they'll get cynical, and that'll be the worst thing.
I think that, I mean, as we age, we should actually take advantage of the fact that we do have more time, and so we should just take time, and that should make us less grumpy.
Thank you, Michael, and that's a lovely thought to end on. Michael Moynihan on the panel, and Brodie Kane. Thank you, Brodie, as well.
You're welcome.
We're back tomorrow, and Checkpoint, of course, coming up with John Campbell.
Tonight, 5 men found guilty of the vicious kidnapping and manslaughter of an Auckland woman who fell bound and gagged from the boot of a moving car. The temperature has dropped. By golly, the snow is falling and roads are closed. Yes, it is winter, but the NZTA is going to tell us where you can't drive. One man recounts the most wild ride he's ever had on board the Inter-Islander, complete with sick bags and bewildered-looking tourists. Donald Trump's son has released emails showing he eagerly agreed to meet with a Russian lawyer to obtain incriminating information about Hillary Clinton. Tapuae opens its doors for winter and meat stolen to order from supermarkets. Thanks for being with us. We'll be back after the news.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batanaho. 5 men have been found guilty of the kidnapping and manslaughter of Auckland woman Jindarat Prutsiriporn. The verdicts were delivered this afternoon after a 10-week trial in the High Court. Jessie Chang was there.
Ms Prutsiriporn died from head injuries in March last year after she threw herself from the boot of a moving car while bound and gagged. The Crown said she was lured from her house on the pretense of a drug deal and kidnapped by members and associates of the headhunters gang. The jury took 2 days to decide Senlek Liu, Apichat Korhum Klang, Luigi Javier, Tafito Vaifale and Joseph Horua were guilty of kidnapping and manslaughter. The men have been remanded in custody and will be sentenced alongside 5 others who had earlier pleaded guilty to similar charges. Another man, Tavita Whangupo, was acquitted of a kidnapping charge. From the High Court in Auckland, ko Jessie Chang, aho.
Black ice and snow could continue to cause problems on the road around the lower South Island overnight tonight as the cold blast slowly makes its way up the country. All but one alpine pass is now open, but the Transport Agency is warning roads could close again if the snow continues to fall. Porter's Pass in Canterbury is the only one still shut, also blocking access through to Arthur's Pass. Lindesenberg's passes in the Mackenzie district are open to vehicles with chains but may close again tonight. A motel owner in Fairlie, which was completely cut off yesterday, had to turn away more than a dozen travellers. Tracy Harper from Aorangi Motels says many people who planned to head on to Wanaka or Tekapo were left with nowhere to go.
I turned away probably about 15 cars. The other motels around here as well were the same deal. They had so many people driving in just looking for accommodation and big groups, which is really hard being ski season and holidays. You don't have many rooms available, so we just did what we could, and most of Fairlie was full last night, I think.
Motelier Tracy Harper. The fire service says strong winds are lifting roofs and flinging trampolines in Wellington and Porirua. Several flights into Wellington have been diverted, delayed or cancelled due to the weather, and waves of up to 7 metres mean all Cook Strait ferry sailings are cancelled until Friday morning. Forest and Bird says it's outrageous senior cabinet ministers are still considering introducing special economic zones after being told not to by officials. Such zones could speed up investments and developments such as coal mines and salmon farms by suspending existing laws. In March, officials advised the government not to proceed, saying the zones could undermine environmental regulations and inflame tensions surrounding controversial projects. The Economic Development Minister, Simon Bridges, says the government's still discussing whether or not to bring them in, despite acknowledging they have pros and cons. Forest and Bird's Chief Executive Kevin Haig says the public should be alarmed.
The scope of law and regulation that the government is proposing to suspend to facilitate these developments is breathtaking.
Kevin Haig. The United States House Intelligence Committee wants Donald Trump Jr. to appear before it and give further information about his meeting with a Russian lawyer who claimed to have information about Hillary Clinton. A Democrat committee member says he wants to interview everyone who was part of the meeting at Trump Tower, including the president's son-in-law Jared Kushner. The Republican Senator Lindsey Graham calls the situation bizarre.
It shows a disposition to be helped by Russia. He's new to politics. Maybe he didn't know how the rules work, but if you're offered assistance from a foreign government in your campaign, the only answer is no.
Senator Lindsey Graham, the Russian lawyer at the centre of the allegations, Natalia Veselnitskaya, has insisted she was never in possession of information that could have damaged Mrs. Clinton. Freezing conditions in Christchurch didn't stop thousands of people turning out for an America's Cup parade in the city this afternoon. Fans braved snow in parts of the city and sleety showers for the hour-long parade and formal welcome to Emirates Team New Zealand and yachting's top trophy. One, Jeff Thompson, says it's great the city has been given the chance to celebrate the win with a parade.
Well, you've got to support our team, don't you? They did bloody well to bring it back home again where it belongs. And I was even able to touch the cup and feel the weight of it.
Christchurch resident Jeff Thompson. The final victory parade will be held in Dunedin tomorrow. It's 5:05. And All Blacks Aaron and Ben Smith won't be playing for the Highlanders in their final pool match of the Super Rugby season against the Queensland Reds in Dunedin on Friday. All Blacks Waisake Naholo centre Malakai Feketoa and hooker Liam Coltman are in the starting lineup, while All Black Liam Squire's also back from injury. Coach Tony Brown says Ben Smith could have played this week, but after speaking to the medical team, they decided to rest him.
He probably just needs a real quality week of full-on training and get that under his belt and then get into full preparation mode for the quarterfinals. So that's our plan with him.
The Highlanders are fourth in the New Zealand Conference and will play either South Africa's Lions or the Crusaders in the quarterfinals. The former silver fern shooter Catherine Tuivaiti is joining the growing number of New Zealand netballers heading to Australia. Tuivaiti, who played for the Central Pulse this season, has signed with the Adelaide Thunderbirds for next year's Australian domestic competition. The New Zealand cyclist Jack Bauer was punched in the head by a fellow rider during the 10th stage of the Tour de France. Bauer, who finished 25th on the stage, was belted by the Frenchman and former boxer Nasser Bouyani after the rider received a slight nudge. Bouyani was fined $280 and docked a minute. Fellow New Zealand rider George Bennett remains in 10th place, just under 4 minutes behind the race leader and defending champion Chris Froome. And New Zealand have suffered their first loss at the Softball World Champs in Canada, beaten 7-3 by Venezuela. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Dana Bergen-Wyman. She's a dame, but she fights like a knight with an axe, dressed in body armour. They call it full metal combat, and it makes the Lions test look like a game of, well, tiddlywinks really. We fly solo with Imogen Alcorn, and this week's overseas correspondent Will Flockton reports in from Brighton, where big chunks of the coastline are falling into the sea, and there's a digger on the loose. On Nights from after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow, and severe weather warnings and watches are in force for heavy rain, snow and strong winds for central and eastern areas. Northland to Waitomo, including Coromandel, the Central High Country, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Showers, some heavy and possibly thundery from Waikato to Northland, easing in the south later tomorrow. Bay of Plenty in Gisborne, a few showers. Taranaki to Wellington, also Wairarapa, occasional rain becoming persistent with heavy falls this evening. Snow lowering to 500 metres this evening. Southerly gales severe about Cook Strait. Marlborough and Canterbury, showers, snow above 200 metres, showers easing and the snow level rising later tomorrow. Nelson, fine and cloudy periods, isolated snow showers about the eastern ranges. It's fine for Buller, Westland and Fiordland, Otago and Southland, showers, snow to 200 metres, easing and the snow level rising tomorrow, and the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and a few showers tomorrow. It's exactly 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you so much, Katrina, and thank you everyone for being with us. Coming up on Checkpoint tonight, roads closed and more to come. The latest from NZTA about where the ice and snow is doing its darndest to keep people indoors. Winter means road closures, but Tapuae marae opening. We're at the marae as it prepares to take in people with nowhere else to go. Donald Trump Jr. and the emails that reveal he was doing what the White House has insisted no Trump was doing, looking to Russia for the dirt on Hillary Clinton. All of that coming up before 6. But first, a High Court jury has just found 5 men guilty of an Auckland woman's kidnapping and manslaughter. Jindara Putsuriporn died from head injuries in March last year after she threw herself from the boot of a moving car while bound and gagged. The jury took nearly 2 days to reach the guilty verdicts for kidnapping and causing the death of Miss Putsuriporn by threats or fear of violence. Another man who was charged with kidnapping has been cleared. Detective Senior Sergeant Sean Vickers, who was in charge of the operation, spoke to media outside the High Court in Auckland a short time ago.
At this time I can say that the police and family of Jindarat are very pleased with the verdicts that were delivered today. I can say that it's been a very long and complex investigation for the investigation team and a very long trial. Due to sentencing coming up within the next month, there'll be no further comment from police at this time. But I can say that we're continuing to work with Jindarat's family and associates to support them through the process.
Our reporter Sarah Robson was in court for the verdict and joins us now. Hi Sarah, this was a complex case, wasn't it?
That's right, John. This was a 10-week trial involving 6 defendants. Now, the jury heard from over 100 witnesses during that time, and they had to consider around 2,000 pages of evidence, so that's a lot of material to go through. And so it took them nearly 2 days, as you said before, to reach this afternoon's verdicts, and those verdicts were delivered about an hour and a half ago here at the High Court in Auckland.
And what was the reaction? What happened when the verdicts were delivered?
So the jury delivered unanimous verdicts on the 5 men who were facing both manslaughter and kidnapping charges. Now, the courtroom itself was very quiet as they were read out, and there was no emotion from those defendants. However, the 6th man, Tavita Whangupo, who was facing just a kidnapping charge, the jury reached a majority verdict on that one, and he was found not guilty of kidnapping. Now, he actually thanked the jury and the judge, and he's now walked free. Now, as you heard before, police outside the court, they're not saying that much at this stage. They'll be saying more about the sentencing after the sentencing. And as Sean Vickers said earlier, you know, they are continuing to offer support to Ms. Prutsiraporn's family.
Yes, the circumstances in which she came to be on the road in Tapuae, bound and gagged, were highly unusual to say the least, Sarah.
That's right. Now, this all happened in March last year. Now, Ms. Prutsiraporn was actually seen by about 4 witnesses tumbling from the boot of the car in Tapuae. She was bound and gagged and had a serious head injury. Now, she didn't die immediately. She died not long after in hospital. Now, it took the police some time to identify her. They actually released a picture of a tattoo that she had. Now, it was actually in May last year when the police finally laid charges against a number of people who they believed were responsible. So the 5 men who were found guilty today will be sentenced late next month alongside five others who earlier pleaded guilty to similar manslaughter and kidnapping charges.
Sarah Robson, live from the High Court. Thank you very much indeed. So just to recap on that, the verdicts came in a short time ago. A High Court jury has found 5 men guilty of kidnapping and manslaughter, and a 6th man who was charged with kidnapping cleared by a majority decision of the jury. It's 12 minutes past 5. Thank you for being with us on Checkpoint. Let's turn now to the weather and its impact on the roads in some regions. Yes, it is winter, and yes, winter does happen every year. But there's a particular belt in this front from the south, and roads are being closed in increasing numbers with more to come, we're told. And throughout the south and the lower north, roads must be driven with extreme care. A tag team effort in Kaikoura today with State Highway 1 reopening to the south, while the alternative inland route was closed due to snow. That's been reversed now, but if you have to go to or from the town, please take care. It's the inland route again, and real caution is advised. To look at the big picture, we're joined by NZTA's Regional Transport Systems Manager Mark Owen. Thank you, Mark. Let's start on State Highway 1 in the centre of the North Island.
The Desert Road is currently closed. There was a truck crash earlier in the day, and they're still doing the clean-up. And it's also worth noting that with the weather that's coming in, it is likely to close given the predictions of snow that are forecast.
Right, so a combination of bad luck and bad weather on the Desert Road.
Absolutely, yes.
OK, let's head to the passes in the South Island. What's open and what's shut in terms of the big roads?
So the main roads that we've got closed at the moment are State Highway 73, so that's the Alphas Pass, State Highway 93, Mataura to Clinton, and State Highway 85, Palmerston to Kyburn. And some other roads, for example, the road to Hollywood into Milford Sound has got restrictions on it. A lot of the other roads are open, but they are, obviously with the cold weather we've had through, there's high risk of ice, snow conditions, and we're just really advising people to check before they travel on their journey to see whether those roads are open or closed.
And there's a very real sense from the Met Office that this is going to get worse before it gets better, right? So necessary travel only in those areas?
Definitely. I mean, we use the term know before you go. So the key thing is we're encouraging people to obviously listen to your radio station, but certainly check the NZTA website and only travel if really necessary in those areas that are going to be affected by snow or ice. The forecast predicted for the lower North Island, particularly the Wellington area tomorrow morning, is not looking good. So we're already planning now for what might happen, but there's certainly some heavy rainfall and high winds predicted. So really advising people just to sort of plan ahead and think about what the alternatives are if they can't travel. OK, how's the gorge looking in Wellington, the Noranga Gorge? Yeah, so we've been talking to the geotech engineers today about what the solutions are. Unfortunately, they won't be able to do much until the weather clears, but we do have a solution to make it safer, and we'll be putting that in over the next few days once the weather has cleared. Is
traffic better during the school holidays? Is there slightly reduced demand during rush hour?
That's right. We've certainly noticed a difference, and that's probably been one of the saving graces for this event is while we know people were significantly impacted yesterday, it could have been a lot worse if it was outside school holiday times. But it was a big day with the parade in town, so there was a lot of people. But today people obviously were aware that there was only 2 of the 3 lanes open, and while there was some delay, it wasn't anything major as we had yesterday.
Are you worried about the wind that's coming in tomorrow and the heavy rain in terms of further exacerbating the damage on that hillside in the gorge?
Well, there's a number of areas where we are vulnerable, so it's not just that area. We've got crews that are on standby and be ready to respond. But certainly with the rainfall that's predicted, there is likelihood of surface flooding, and the high winds certainly, once things get wet, there is a risk of sort of debris, slips and trees coming down. So we just advise people to absolutely drive with caution. It's not normal driving conditions. They certainly need to sort of travel a bit slower and just keep a watch out for what's ahead in terms of the challenging weather event.
Mark Owen from NZTA. We just want to point out, of course, the Manawatu Gorge is closed for the foreseeable future. And the Waiōeka Gorge, which is between Gisborne and Opotiki, remains closed. A giant slip there. It is being cleared. But we are going to look at the resilience of New Zealand roading on Checkpoint. It's not just the roads where care is advised and being taken. Strait Shipping's Bluebridge ferry has announced it's halted sailings as the wild weather affects Cook Strait earlier than expected. It says the Straitsman, which was due to leave Picton this afternoon at 2 p.m. with freight on board, would remain in Picton with all other sailings cancelled between now and Friday morning. Into Islander sailings are being cancelled, but some have happened today safely, we hasten to add, but not entirely pleasantly, just quietly. Shane Brocklebank was a passenger on the 9 a.m. Inter-Island ferry from Wellington to Picton this morning. He told me it was anything but plain sailing.
We only booked to go on the ferry because my son really wanted to go on the ferry, and I would rather have flown, but we decided we would do it for him. And then my wife last night cancelled her tickets and booked my daughter and her a flight each. So it was just my son and I on the ferry.
So the boys on the sea and the girls in the air, so you can compare and contrast. Who had the worst trip?
I think we did. It was horrific.
Describe it to me. What was it like when you're actually out on the Strait?
Massive waves, huge waves. I mean, I've crossed the Strait probably hundreds of times in my life, and they were huge. No one was moving. Everyone got told to sit down and hold on. People lying down in the toilets, people lying on the floors just because they didn't want to move. Palings from above your head falling in. It was bad.
What, you mean parts of the ceiling falling down?
Yeah. Yep.
Wow. And people so physically ill that they just had to lie on the floor.
They just couldn't move. They were just done. And if you moved, a lot of people were falling over. So no, it wasn't that good. The staff were great. The staff were amazing. They were really, really nice people.
Should the sailing have gone?
Yeah, I think so. We didn't think so. It was a good thing.
Yeah, that's reasonably philosophical of you. Were people vomiting?
Yeah, there was a lot of vomit, but I mean, I never felt unsafe. I never felt like we were in any danger or anything like that.
Yes, if heavy seas stopped those ferries from going out, they'd never sail, would they? Basically.
Yeah, no. It's Wellington, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it is. And so the boys are on the ferry. Bits of the ceiling are falling in. People are lying on the floor and chundering. How are the girls going? So where were they flying into from Wellington? Were they on a little plane? Were they?
Yeah, they flew from Wellington to Nelson.
Right, on a small one. And what was that like?
My wife said it was the worst flight she had been on in her life. So she said it was up and down. They're only on a very small plane as well. So, but it only took them 35 minutes, not almost 4 hours.
Yeah, it's a big difference, isn't it? It's a really big difference.
All for love. All to be a good dad.
I shouldn't laugh, but what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? Shane Brocklebank, who was taking his boy across the Cook Strait on the ferry this morning, sailing's off for the time being. Just hearing from an excellent Twitter colleague or comrade or whatever they're called on Twitter, saying he's just driven the Saddle Road, which is the alternative route to Manawatu Gorge. More potholes than seals, he's saying. Despite the frosty conditions in the South Island, Emirates Team New Zealand was given a warm welcome at a victory parade in Christchurch. They're moving south. Snow in parts of the city, along with hail and rain, didn't stop thousands of brave folk from showing their support in the third parade to be held for the team since their return to New Zealand last week. Maya Bari was out there with them.
At midday today, Emirates Team New Zealand travelled with yachting's top trophy from the central bus interchange to the Christchurch Art Gallery, where a formal welcome was held. Organisers had warned people to wrap up warmly, with a high of 5 degrees and sleety showers forecast. But the cold conditions did not deter Cantabrians, who said the opportunity was one they couldn't miss.
Oh no, wouldn't have missed it for the world. Hey, it's all about loyalty.
We've come from swimming lessons actually, and it was just on the way home, so we didn't want to miss it. It's an amazing experience.
Oh, pretty exciting. Yeah. Bit chilly, but a few people out.
Oh, it's very exciting to celebrate something coming into town. Yeah, the guys did a great job overseas and it was very exciting.
Oh, fantastic, and it's good to see the crowd, supporting them as well in such a cold condition.
Victory parades have already been held in Auckland and Wellington, but helmsman Peter Burling says each one has been special, and the turnout in Christchurch had been amazing given the weather.
It's just amazing to be out here today. It was sleeting and snowing this morning, and we looked out the window and thought there wouldn't be many people turning out, but it's just amazing to see how many people have.
And safe to say, not a frosty reception then.
No, I think the amount of people is keeping us warm, and we've definitely got on all the clothes we own. We're not quite used to these temperatures from where we've come from, but it's amazing.
Christchurch resident Jeff Thompson says it was great the city had been given the chance to celebrate the win with a parade.
Well, you've got to support our team, haven't you? They did bloody well to bring it back home again where it belongs. And I was even able to touch the cup and feel the weight of it.
And do you think this makes up for San Francisco?
Definitely. If you don't talk about that, that's just a nightmare. This is what we talk about.
Christchurch Yacht Club member, 12-year-old Bailey Atkinson, says at the moment he sails a boat a lot smaller than Team New Zealand's, but one day he hopes to be good enough to race in the America's Cup. He was looking forward to meeting his idols.
Happy because we to celebrate the America's Cup and we won, and excited to see them.
Who are you most excited to see?
The whole team and Peter Burling, because he's the captain and he made us win.
The final victory parade will be held in Dunedin tomorrow, but Team New Zealand says it wants to start planning a regional tour later in the year. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Maya Burry.
Let's go to Washington now. Blood is thicker than water, they say, and in this case it's also more problematic. Having denied accusations that his bid for presidency benefited from anti-Clinton smears coming from Russia, Donald Trump now faces evidence for the prosecution in the form of his own son. Preempting the New York Times, whose work on this story was leading to exactly this point, Donald Trump Jr. released emails showing he eagerly agreed to meet with a Russian lawyer with a view to obtaining incriminating information on Hillary Clinton. US officials are currently investigating alleged Russian meddling in the US election. It now appears they didn't know about this material. All of this after months of denials from the president and his White House that anyone had spoken to the Russians about anything. The BBC's Gavin Hewitt reports.
Congratulations, Dad, we love you!
Donald Trump Jr. was at the heart of his father's election campaign. Today he embarked on a high-risk strategy. Fearing more revelations about a meeting at Trump Tower with a Russian lawyer in June of last year, he decided to disclose the emails between himself and the publicist who arranged the meeting. The emails raised serious and disturbing questions. The 4 pages of emails reveal exchanges between Trump Jr. and a British publicist, Rob Goldston. In one email, Mr. Goldston offers to put him in contact with a lawyer linked to high-level Russian officials who are promising official documents and information that would incriminate Hillary Clinton and would be very useful to your father. The email continues. This is obviously very high-level, sensitive information, but it's part of Russia and its government support for Mr. Trump. In reply, Mr. Trump Jr. says, "If it's what you say, I love it." The meeting was set up by the British publicist Rob Goldston. Much was promised, But the Russian lawyer today denied any links with the Kremlin. She was asked why those at the meeting thought she was going to deliver information on Hillary Clinton.
It's quite possible that maybe they were looking for such information. They wanted it so badly.
But the reaction from politicians today shows that these drip-drip revelations are proving damaging to the Trump administration.
It's serious, and this is a serious situation and one that is a long way from over.
It doesn't appear that when they had information that this person might be connected with the Russian government or a Russian national, that they didn't immediately call the FBI.
This is very problematic. We cannot allow foreign governments to reach out to anybody's campaign and say, we'd like to help you. That is a non-starter.
So what does President Trump make of it all? Well, today he said that his son was a high-quality person and praised his transparency. But the president is also said to be frustrated. But after today, the questions are only likely to get more searching. Tomorrow, the president goes back to Europe, to France, determined to avoid the impression that his is an administration under siege.
Every time we cover Donald Trump, someone emails in and complains that we're never nice about him. I do want to point out to that man that was from the BBC. Gavin Hewitt and lots of people are doing these stories, and no one is making this stuff up. Donald Trump Jr. has given an interview to Fox News in which he acknowledges he might have done things a bit differently.
In retrospect, I probably would have done things a little differently. Again, this is before the Russia mania. This is before they were building it up in the press. For me, this was opposition research. They had something, maybe concrete evidence to all the stories I'd been hearing about, but they were probably underreported for, years, not just during the campaign. So I think I wanted to hear it out. But really, it went nowhere, and it was apparent that that wasn't what the meeting was actually about.
Donald Trump Jr., the president's problem is the way new information keeps coming out bit by bit, seemingly at odds with strong denials from himself and the White House. And as the White House version of events and the external version of events becomes increasingly at odds, people look back at what else was happening at the time. Now, today, Yasha Ali from the New York Magazine tweeted a 2-item timeline. The email showed Donald Trump Jr. agreed to the meeting with the Russian lawyer about Hillary Clinton at 5:16 on the 7th of June. 3 hours and 57 minutes later, his father was speaking to a campaign rally.
I am going to give a major speech on probably Monday of next week, and we're going to be discussing all of the things that have taken place with the Clintons. I think you're going to find it very informative and very, very interesting. I wonder if the press will want to attend. Who knows?
Donald Trump speaking 3 hours and 57 minutes after his son had agreed to that meeting with the Russian lawyer. Tapuae Marae will open its doors to the homeless again next week, but instead of being funded by kindness and aroha, the government will be footing the bill. This time more than 60 families were helped last year, but this time the program will be much smaller, with capacity for 5 families or 25 people at a time. The Marae's resource manager for Manakitanga is John Kukutai. He gave our Māori Affairs correspondent Mihi Narangi Forbes and visual journalist Claire Easton Farrelly a tour.
Kia ora, morena. Kia ora, John Boy. Well, this is another year, 2017, and you're opening up Tapuae again for the homeless.
Yep.
Walk us through it.
So it's a really different structure from last year. So this time we actually only hosting 25 heads with up to 5 families, which we've got 5 cabins here.
The brand new 2-bedroom cabins provided by the government will provide a space for families from next Tuesday.
So this is one of the rooms where our families will be sleeping. So we'll be sleeping families in here, which in this room and also in this room. They've got their own toilet as well.
It's kind of like a 2-bedroom cabin.
2-bedroom cabin, their own toilet, their own showers. So the marae will provide them beddings.
All up, there are 5 cabins, which can each accommodate families of up to 5, and they're available for the next 6 months. So the ballpark cost to the government of Tapuae as an emergency housing provider is $960 per family per week. That includes some food and social services. Not far from the marae, families in other forms of emergency accommodation, including lodges and motels, are costing the government considerably more than that without food. In short, Tapuae can give more for less.
So we're actually only going to be hosting them roughly about 12 weeks on the marae to make sure they can cope to be in a house. And from there, the social service team will assess them to make sure they're fit to be standable and sustainable to go into their whares.
The wharekai, or shared dining room, has brand new benches and the cupboards are full. Yep, so this is the wharekai, you're nearly there?
Yeah, so this is the wharekai that hosted our whānaus last year, 2016. So we've actually done it all up, so it's a different area. So these here is the cupboards, full kai. So all these food that's in here was donated to the marae last year. So we're just going to reuse it for our whānau that come in.
Wow, look at that. You're ready to go. Uncle Tom is from Ngāti Maniapoto, but has lived in Māngere for 40 years. He's been busy working away to prepare for the influx of homeless. Last time it was just a mat.
That's right.
You did a great job. You might get the call up.
Oh, no, it's my young fella. My young fella did it.
So you just wanted to keep them dry and warm?
No, what he wanted, when they want a tea break, they just can come and sit on here.
Nice
and our next objective is to get a bigger one on the other side.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe one day we could have some sliding windows.
Right, yeah, yeah, that's what he wanted.
Yeah, neat, eh? It's just about utilising all the space here.
Yep.
Are you did some beautiful work inside there.
Oh, no, not me. It's these young ones. I just tell them what to do and they do it.
Oh, you're a good leader. We need lots of leaders, eh? So you're looking forward to these whānau coming in on Tuesday?
Yes. It's better than on the street, eh? It's better than sleeping on the street.
Adding to that, they'll learn valuable skills from the marae staff. And the cooking side, do you find, whānau need cooking lessons and things like that?
Yeah, so we'll have a person in here, breakfast, lunch and tea, to guide them, to support them and just help them to cook and budget and use only what they could use. So that'll be a good challenge for them as well.
Each family that arrives from next week will receive a pōwhiri in line with the kawa or protocol of Tapuae. And they'll have the added benefit of living in a real-life marae situation. These people may be able to have an experience about living, near a marae and the tikanga and the reo stuff that goes with that, perhaps?
So I think a lot of people feel more comfortable to be in a marae than being in a motel because they've got restrictions. We've got restrictions here, but it's about maintaining our tikanga and kawa, and that our family do know when they come in for the introduction, that's the sort of korero that we'll be giving them as well.
Last year, a Give a Little page raised thousands of dollars.
And so with the Give a Little page, that has gone into the Manaki Tangata account, and that is to be used to buying mats, doing up the whānau room for where our whānau rawakura will be feeding. We'll be feeding them there as well.
While you can feel the spirit of manaakitanga or hospitality, the management of the project this year means while the doors are open, there will be restrictions. These cabins are for families only. Individuals or couples without children will have to look elsewhere. Mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei ko mihi ngā rangi Forbes, ahau.
Coming up on Checkpoint, meat stolen to water. A Countdown supermarket removes all Silver Fern Farms meat from its shelves. The Māori Party wants to put the iwi in Kiwi rail with plans to get regional railways back on track. We'd love your opinion on that subject too when we get to it. And Nona with business news. But first, here's Katrina Batten with the 5:33.5 headlines.
Woohoo! Early. A jury has found 5 men guilty over the kidnapping and death of an Auckland woman. The verdicts were delivered this afternoon after a 10-week trial and 2 days of deliberation. Black ice and snow could continue to cause problems on the roads around the lower South Island overnight as the cold blast slowly makes its way up the country. All but one Alpine Pass is now open, but the Transport Agency warns roads could close again if snow continues to fall. Strong winds are lifting roofs in Wellington and Porirua. Several flights into the capital have been diverted, delayed or cancelled due to the weather, and waves of up to 7 metres mean all Cook Strait ferry sailings are cancelled until Friday morning. A Māori party plan to get iwi involved in regional rail lines has not been dismissed out of hand by the government, but says the sums must add up. The iwi rail scheme to bring back mothballed lines, beginning with the Napier-Gisborne route, is designed to provide jobs and boost the regional economies. Forest and Bird says it's outrageous the government is still considering introducing special economic zones after being advised not to by officials. Such zones could speed up investments and developments such as coal mines and salmon farms by suspending existing laws. The United States House Intelligence Committee wants Donald Trump Jr. to appear before it and give further information about his meeting with a Russian lawyer who claimed to have information about Hillary Clinton. A Democrat committee member says he wants to interview everyone who was part of the meeting at Trump Tower, including the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. NZ Bus says the injured driver involved in a fatal crash yesterday in Auckland has been offered counselling. The man driving the car involved died at the scene, and 2 young children, a 1-year-old and 2-year-old, remain in hospital. The younger one is critical. Those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6.
Thanks so much, Katrina. Turning to business news now with Nona Peltier beside me. And Nona, normally I have some notes about what we're going to discuss. Today the page has just got 13 X's on it, so whatever you're going to talk about
it's just becoming more and more mysterious, isn't it? Every day.
But this is kind of mysterious because I'm looking over your shoulder rudely, and you're going to talk about PushPay, right?
Yeah.
And tell us what they do.
Well, PushPay is another one of these. Now, last week we talked about tech companies that were doing it tough, you know, having a hard time. These are a couple of tech companies that are doing the opposite. They're really going ahead. PushPay is one of them. PushPay is like a mobile app type of thing, which helps churches collect donations from their parishioners and so on. So it's really they're putting their faith in the churches in the United States to drive up their revenue.
Quite extraordinary.
And
so it's not the old wooden plate being passed around and you're whacking 20 cents like when I was a kid.
No, you can
this is credit cards, FPOS, the whole
smartphones,
tithing, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, the whole thing. Anyways, look, they're expecting very large growth in revenue, and they're looking to raise some additional money. They're thinking that their revenues will be $100 million a year, and that's an annualized revenue. That's by the end of March next year.
$100 million a year revenue?
Yeah.
And their sole way of earning that revenue is church donations. Is that their sole?
Yeah, well, pretty much. Yeah, that's it. A lot of people go to church in the United States.
What an extraordinary story.
Yeah, exactly. And anyway, so they've done very well, and now they've listed it. They're listed in New Zealand, Australia, and they're looking to list in the United States. Maybe within the next 3 years.
Good God, I knew nothing. Good God, did you ever use it?
You've got it. Well, and it was another really interesting, another much bigger and more well-known tech company is Xero. They held their annual meeting in Sydney today, and I had a chance to talk to Rod Drury, who's the founder. Well, there's no one who's a better cheerleader than Rod Drury when it comes to its own company, and he said that really they've outperformed everyone else in the region in terms of tech companies with strong revenue growth, which is great because they're going to use some of that revenue to fund new development that takes advantage of artificial intelligence and machine learning. So they've got this cloud-based software, which, accountants use and all sorts of small businesses and so on. Well, they said that platform, because of the way it's written, really gives them an edge when it comes to developing new services for accountants and small businesses. And it's all using machine learning. So they'll be drilling down into those servers that they've got all over the world to deliver new services to their customers. And they say it won't cost that much. They're still on track to break even. And so, yeah, good for them.
Roger, he sells Xero. He sells that dream very passionately and persuasively, doesn't he?
He really does.
Yeah.
His share price has gone up and down. Today it didn't do as well as you would have expected considering what he had to say. But overall, the market itself was down about 0.5%, 43 points to 7,586, and that's the top 50 index. Xero's share price was down 3 cents to $26.86. PushPay's was steady, though, at $1.65. Now, the New Zealand dollar is also steady, but the market's a bit rocky right now. Looking at what Donald Trump Jr.'s been up to with the emails, It's unsettling a little bit. And on top of that, Janet Yellen's about to give some evidence.
Right.
She's the chair of the U.S. Federal Reserve. People will be watching to see how that's going to shape up in terms of interest rates. Is that going to how the dollar is going to do in terms of its strength? Right now, it's dipped a little bit. So the New Zealand dollar benefited slightly, 72.4 US cents, 94.6 Australian, and 56.3 British pounds.
Nona Pelzio, thank you very much indeed. We're going to stay with business in a way, I guess. All Silver Fern Farms meat was temporarily removed from a Countdown store at Sylvia Park in Auckland earlier this week after it was stolen by thieves. If you're watching online or on TV, here's the sign that greeted customers looking for Silver Fern products at the store's meat shelf. If you're listening on the radio, this is what it said. Dear customers, due to high theft activity towards the Silver Fern beef, lamb and venison range, the management team have removed these products from the shelf. Products available on request. Our apologies for any inconvenience. Now, Countdown has declined to be interviewed, but its spokeswoman, Antoinette Laird, says the product was withdrawn after a one-off incident at its Sylvia Park store. It won't say how much meat was stolen or when it happened, but Countdown says all Silver Fern Farms products were taken off its shelves while it investigated the theft, which does seem to have been very targeted. We're told it's now done. The products have been put on the shelves. Silver Fern Farms also declined to be interviewed, saying the one-off theft had little impact. Now, rival supermarket chain, Foodstuffs, says it's also had to temporarily take meat like corned beef off its shelves because it was being stolen. Meat, like any other high-value product, and it is high value in this country, even though we grow it, is frequently targeted by shoplifters across the stores. The crime prevention software company Aura says meat is one of the most stolen items in grocery stores now. Chief Executive Phil Thompson told our reporter Anusha Bradley its own research shows it's being stolen to order by gangs who are reselling it on the black market.
What a lot of people don't realise is that it's groups and people doing this as a day job, targeting high-value items such as meat, and then on-selling that pretty quickly.
So people aren't stealing this just because they're hungry?
No, I mean, what you'll find is that the theft of these items such as meat comes in quite high quantities, and it's not for feeding, it's actually for on-selling really quickly to black markets.
How are they selling this, though?
We've seen a range of different methods being used to sell it. Some of those do include markets such as restaurants or pubs or dairies, but then also more commonly these days it's going online, so on Facebook and other social media channels to sell it for a heavily reduced price.
Is this happening all around the country?
Yeah, it is. It's not any particular location. We're seeing it right across the country. For a few years now, meat has been a prevalent item that's being targeted, and it's not just meat, but that's one of the things that we're seeing coming through.
What is the most targeted item?
Retailers right across the country are being hit every day, and it's now more than $2 million every single day being stolen. So it's an issue that's faced by everyone, and it's impacting on the community.
Quite an extraordinary state of affairs. That's Aura Chief Executive Phil Thompson talking to Anusha Bradley. The Māori Party wants to put iwi into Kiwi Rail with a bold strategy to get regional railways back on track. Its iwi Rail scheme would bring back mothballed lines, beginning with the Napier-Gisborne route, and build new infrastructure with iwi and local communities. The party says the government would have to stump up about $350 million just to get the public-private partnership off the ground. Here's our political reporter, May Heron.
The Māori Party says the government's current transport policy favours investment into roads in Auckland and other big cities, without plans for upgrading and expanding regional infrastructure. Its co-leader, Marama Fox, says iwi Rail would work separately from Kiwi Rail, and getting local iwi involved would ensure the regional lines were successful.
I don't think the government are as invested in it as we are, because we built that rail, our parents, our ancestors, but also that land that rail sits on was taken from Māori, and if we want to connect our people and bring them out of isolation, we are determined to make it work, because it raises the standard of living for all our people, and it is a social investment as well.
Ms Fox says iwi from around the country have told her they want to jump on board the idea. She says fixing the Napier-Gisborne rail route would be the first step for iwi rail at an estimated cost of $6.5 million.
We've talked to the producers. They believe that we get a profit off these lines by helping them get their produce to market, and they're committed to doing it. And if we open up the top of the East Cape, we open up an untapped tourism market, and iwi own that land, and it'll be iwi who'll be driving those businesses as well.
Part of the Napier-Gisborne line was washed out by storms in 2012, and at the time there was just one train journey a week, which rail managers say was not enough to justify the expensive repairs. Since then, part of the route from Wairoa to Napier has been rerouted. Nikki Sarank from the Gisborne Rail Action Group has been campaigning for the entire route to be reconnected.
At the moment, iwi are very concerned about their assets and how they'll be used in future. I think this is a win-win situation for them.
Iwi Rail would also require $100 million a year from the government's Transport Fund and an initial investment of $350 million. The Transport Minister, Simon Bridges, says the government isn't rubbishing the scheme, but says it would need to be convinced of its economic viability.
The idea of iwi being involved is interesting. We understand the value of the role. We probably want to look at it more closely. And obviously we're not going to conduct election negotiations at this point well before an election.
The Māori Party President, Tukuroi Rangi-Morgan, says iwi Rail also has other initiatives that would boost local economies.
We will guarantee jobs for local people and address unemployment by reintroducing rail sector wage and job training subsidies, a policy that worked in the past when our people manned the rail, drove the trains and built the railways.
The Māori Party says it does not have bottom lines in coalition talks, but this will definitely be a policy it will try and push during negotiations. Atu e te whare paremata mo te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko mei hiran aho.
A month on from the Grenfell Tower tragedy, a disaster victim identification worker still working on the recovery operation says it's the worst incident he's ever been involved in after more than 18 years in the job.
We've never had an incident to this scale. The pressures it puts on you emotionally are huge. The DVI team are all volunteers, and to ask them to get into a building like this and deal with the stuff they're finding is a big task for them.
Alistair Hutchins said working on the aftermath of the London Tower block blaze, which killed at least 80 people, was harrowing.
It's difficult. It's probably the worst incident I've ever dealt with, and I've been doing DVI now for 18 years. I've dealt with many incidents, and I've never come across one harder, both emotionally and physically, and challenging to deal with.
He said the work involved getting the deceased out of flats, out of corridors and stairwells, and their remains to the morgue for identification, which he warned could be a long process.
And we're looking at a fingertip search of all flats on all floors, and that will involve officers on their hands and knees using small trowels and shovels. They will be removing debris from those flats and using sieves. Now the sieves are going down to a 6mm size, so that we can guarantee that we can pick up small fragments of bone, teeth and any identifiable part of a human body we will pick up at that stage.
Relatives of those missing have been warned formal identification could take at least 4 months. The founding president of the Black Power, Retu Harris, has died. Retu Harris established the gang in the 1970s, attracting members who'd been in state care and felt alienated from their marae and iwi. Te Mano Korehi reporter Shannon Haunui-Thompson looks back on his life.
Retu Harris grew up in Rotorua. He moved to Wellington but found it hard to adapt to city life until he found other young Māori men who were in a similar boat. In 1970, Mr Harris and 6 others formed a gang they called the Black Bulls, which later changed its name to Black Power. Black Power life member and friend Dennis O'Reilly says many of the gang members had been in state care.
The contemporary New Zealand Māori gang really was born in those social welfare homes. That youth rebellion of the 1970s and 80s was sort of looking for a way of reasserting oneself and finding a mana or dignity in that. And I think Retu gave that to people.
Mr O'Reilly says while many Black Power members were young, rebellious and had committed offences, they were not bad people. And A2 Harris, he says, gave them a sense of whānau.
Even though we have been positioned as being outside of the law and even against the law, in fact, he gave a leadership that you would, I suppose, these days describe in terms of whānau ora, or potentiality, rather than pathology.
Jared Gilbert, the author of the book Patched, The History of Gangs in New Zealand, says Reitu Harris had a social conscience and fundamentally moulded the Black Power's principles. He says Reitu Harris wouldn't let Black Power use the swastika symbol like the mongrel mob.
He made no bones about it that dealing marijuana was a fairly key component of the gang scene. He wasn't a saint by any stretch of the imagination, but within his realm, he was a very significant figure and on balance, relative to within the gang scene, an immensely positive force.
Eugene Ryder of Black Power Wellington says Reitu Harris created a modern-day hapu and worked alongside politicians like Labour's Maturata and a former National Prime Minister.
He also had a good relationship with Rob Muldoon when Muldoon was in power. You know, he wasn't shy about expressing the needs of the people in the cities, the people that he knew. So through his relationship with the likes of Muldoon and that, he was able to secure employment and, income for those in the cities.
A relationship the Black Power Wellington chapter honoured by taking his body to Parliament yesterday.
We took him for a ride around to his old haunt and we ended up on the steps of Parliament where we lay him down and did a haka. It was a demonstration of Reitu's mana, not only within the Black Power community, but in the community in general.
Reitu Harris's funeral is expected to be held tomorrow at Rākei ao Marae in Rotuiti. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei, ko Shannon Haunui Thompson, ahau.
9.5 minutes to 6, you're with Checkpoint on RNZ. Thank you for being with us. Iwi Rail. People often respond to rail stories with advocacy and support for rail. Tauranga to Auckland, says Angela, and back. We need to get rail cars, we need rail. Sorry, Angela, I'm butchering this. We need rail to get cars and buses off the roads. Sometimes it's a slow crawl to Auckland. There are lots of retirees living here who would leave cars at home to visit family. And what about tourists? And iwi Rail genius gets at the root of so many problems. That is serious politics. That was somebody from somebody called X. Thank you. Lots of feedback on rail every time we cover it. World heavyweight boxing champ Joseph Parker and champion shot putter Dame Valerie Adams have both played key roles in preparing New Zealand athletes for the Youth Commonwealth Games, which are taking place in the Bahamas next week. A 34-strong New Zealand team will leave tomorrow for the competition. Parker's cousin, Leah Fruin, in keeping with family tradition, will fight in the ring, while discus thrower Conan Bell has been under the tutelage of Dame Val. Sally Murphy reports.
And just one more thing, everyone, so we've got photo sport and getting images in there.
You could feel the nerves and anticipation in the air as some of the 34 athletes heading to the Youth Commonwealth Games met each other for the first time today. One of them, 16-year-old Leah Fruin, started boxing at the age of 12 when her big cousin Joseph Parker started teaching her.
He taught me the basics, that was my start-up with boxing with him, yeah.
And what have you learnt from him?
Self-belief, I guess, yeah, and, the jab and all that. I guess wanting to be the best that I can and wanting to perform well. I know all boxers go through that stage of, wanting to get gold, but, I guess we're all kind of in it to win it, so yeah.
The hard work has paid off. She packs a good punch. Leah wakes up at 6:30 every morning and goes for a run and then spars during lunchtime and trains again after school. She says she's just eager to get into the ring.
Never really know who our opponent's going to be, but I'm excited for the different styles. Favourite part about boxing is meeting the new people, experiencing, going to different countries and, just growing as a boxer as well as a person overall.
Another athlete to watch out for at the Games is Connor Bell, a 16-year-old discus thrower from Auckland.
I first started throwing at the end of year 8 at a school event. I picked up the discus for a school athletics day and I threw it and I did quite well. And ever since then I've never looked back, really.
Your mum said you like to watch YouTube videos and practice in the lounge, is that true?
Yes, that is true. I've worn patches in the carpet. I spend a lot of time analysing discus throwers, international discus throwers, discus legends and their technique and how they throw.
Bell, who throws about 64 metres on average, has been training under Olympic gold medalist Valerie Adams.
At the start, it felt like I was in the presence of a legend, a living legend. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. I've learnt a lot from Val. I've learnt to develop trust in the process so I can get the best result I can.
Standing at 6'2" and weighing 104 kilos, Bell is a tad bigger than your average 16-year-old. His mum Jeanette attributes his country upbringing for that.
He's a decent-sized lad.
It must cost a bit to feed him. What does he eat in a day?
Surprisingly not as much as you'd think. We live on a lifestyle block, so lots of really healthy, nutritious stuff, like we do home-cooked beef and free-range eggs and lots of fruit and veggies. Pretty good basic country food, but lots of it.
Connor and Leah will leave for the Bahamas tomorrow with 32 other athletes who will take part in beach volleyball, swimming, boxing, cycling, throwing and athletics. The games run from July 18th to the 23rd. For Checkpoint, Sally Murphy.
5 and a bit to 6. Let's head south again now to South Canterbury and central Otago, which has spent the day under a blanket of snow. A few people pointing out it is winter. Yes, indeed it is. And this does happen every year. But actually, if you're in it and the roads are open, it can be pretty magic on the scenery front. Bridget Burke spoke to a few folk who were in the thick of it. Kicking off is Adrian Hood, publican of the Ancient Britain Hotel in Naseby, bang in the middle of Central.
It's stunning. Beautiful day. Blue sky, well, partly blue sky, and snow everywhere.
What are the temperatures?
Temperature at the moment is... Just one moment, caller.
Yep.
4.3 degrees.
How low did it get overnight?
Probably around about -4, -5. We've got the ice park going flat out. So the luge, the ice luge, outdoor skating and curling, the tube park, and hopefully talk of a bonspiel. I think everybody's just enjoying it, really. I mean, it's not a bad place to be stuck if you are here. I think some people are trying to make it over to the other side of Central, being Wanaka and Queenstown, but I think they're enjoying the lovely surroundings we have here at the moment.
And what sort of tucker and food are you putting on today?
Oh, plenty of mulled wine. We've got twice cooked chips, homemade chips in gravy. The other thing, the specialty we've got at the moment is bluff oyster and steak pies. Lots of snowball fights. Kids on toboggans going down the streets. Not a lot of traffic around at the moment, so people are just walking around taking photos and enjoying themselves.
So I'm Graham Jones, and I'm the proprietor, owner of the Turihura Railway Hotel in the very heart of central Otago.
How are things looking for you now?
We've got about, 2 inches of snow. We get the odd patch of sun coming through. The roads are very icy. The farmers are feeding out. They can still get out there. I mean, we're all prepared for this. This is not a disaster. It's not a major for us at all. This is pretty normal for winter. 2 years ago, July 2015, we had -21s in the back of the pub here at night for 3 nights. That was cold. But it's pretty manageable. I was looking out the window now. My grandson's made a magnificent snowman. The kids are having a ball.
You'll be keeping warm though, are you, Graham? Got the fires going?
It's pretty manageable here at the moment. Our pub's warm. I've got 3 fires going. I've just lit our old coal range and, we're all toasty.
What will people be eating today?
We've got a very nice homemade bacon bone soup, bacon bone vegetable soup with a very nice bread. We can do bacon egg butties, obviously the standard toasted sandwiches. We've got our famous big bike burger that's full of everything. Had actually some Asians who are trapped here at the moment in a camper van. They just had our burgers. And our giant cheese roll, steak sandwiches. Yep, plenty of options.
I'm in Danzy's past coaching,
in Dante's Pass Road, about half an hour out of Naseby. Oh, it's just snow everywhere, eh? Yeah. Nobody wants to go outside, really.
My name's Nigel Frost. I'm the Mount John Observatory Superintendent, run by University of Canterbury, and at the moment I'm at the Mount John House, looking out over the view from my back window.
Just describe to us what you're seeing there, please, Nigel.
It is a very typical view of the snow and the icy conditions. Up until about 2 weeks ago, we had absolutely no snow at all, but in the last couple of weeks, we've had one reasonably heavy dump of snow, and this one yesterday. So it's a completely white alpine scene at the moment, with snow right down to the village level.
Bridget Burke put that together. Wonderful folk from Central and Central Otago, South Canterbury. Those pictures, by the way, if you're watching, Nigel Frosty was the guy talking at the end, provided some of them, and our cherished and loyal listener, Paul Lecomte from Dunedin, provided some of the others. Wonderful pictures. I hear the Otirihua pub mentioned in dispatches there. I think they said they had 3 fires going. Did they say that? That is, of course, the hometown in the middle of Central of Brian Turner, one of our most fantastic poets. 30 seconds before 6. Lots of feedback coming in tonight in support of any kind of rail, really. You'll take it, and you'll take it anywhere. Thank you for your feedback. It's lovely to hear from you. Text us 2101. You can email us, checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Our Twitter handle is @checkpointrnz, and facebook.com/checkpointrnz. It is tragic that after 18 months or longer from the program, I still have to read that off the screen. Ay, ay, ay. It's coming up to the pips.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. Ice and snow could continue to cause problems on the roads around the lower South Island overnight tonight as the cold blast slowly makes its way up the country. Porters and Arthur's passes are closed, along with the Lewis Pass. Rachel Graham reports.
Lindis and Burke's passes in the Mackenzie district are now open, as long as drivers are carrying chains. But the Transport Agency is warning the roads may close again tonight. Yesterday, the closure of the passes left Fairley completely cut off. Motelier Tracy Harper says she had to turn away about 15 carloads of people who had been left unexpectedly stranded in Fairley yesterday afternoon. Kaikoura is also cut off again tonight, with the inland route closed due to ice and snow, and State Highway 1 closed from 6 p.m. This is Rachel Graham.
The Transport Agency is urging motorists in both islands to plan ahead and only travel if they need to, with the wild weather far from over. Its Regional Transport Systems Manager Mark Owen told Checkpoint snow is likely to close the desert road and crews are standing by as the cold blast moves north.
The forecast predicted for the lower North Island, particularly the Wellington area tomorrow morning, is not looking good. So we're already planning now for what might happen, but there's certainly some heavy rainfall and high winds predicted. So really advising people just to sort of plan ahead and think about what the alternatives are if they can't travel.
Mark Owen says rain and high winds could cause surface flooding and slips. All Inter-Islander and Bluebridge ferry sailings have been cancelled as 7-metre waves pound Cook Strait. Both freight and passenger sailings are not expected to resume until Friday morning, although that could change depending on the conditions. Passenger Shane Brocklebank says the Inter-Islander sailing from Wellington at 9 o'clock this morning was a bumpy ride.
Massive waves, huge waves. I mean, I've crossed the Strait probably hundreds of times in my life, and they were huge. No one was moving. Everyone got told to sit down and hold on. People lying down in the toilet, people lying on the floors just because they didn't want to move. Palings from above your head falling in. It was bad.
Shane Brocklebank says he's never felt unsafe despite the rocky conditions. The police and the family of Jindarat Prutsiriporn say they're pleased with the guilty verdicts for the 5 men who caused her death. Ms Prutsiriporn died from head injuries in March last year after she threw herself from the boot of a moving car while bound and gagged. The jury took nearly 2 days to reach the guilty verdicts for kidnapping and causing the death of Ms Prutsiriporn by threats or fear of violence. Another man who was charged with kidnapping has been cleared. Speaking outside the High Court in Auckland, Detective Senior Sergeant Sean Vickers told media it was a good result.
At this time I can say that the police and family of Jindarat are very pleased with the verdicts that were delivered today. I can say that it's been a very long and complex investigation for the investigation team and a very long trial.
Detective Senior Sergeant Sean Vickers. The government is not dismissing the Māori Party's scheme to get iwi involved in regional rail lines out of hand, but says it would need to be convinced of its economic viability. The iwi rail scheme would work separately from Kiwi Rail to bring back mothballed lines, beginning with the Napier-Gisborne route, and build new infrastructure with iwi and local communities. The Transport Minister, Simon Bridges, says the government has already committed to spend more than $5 billion on rail in the recent budget, and it's important to get good value for money.
The idea of iwi being involved is interesting. We understand the value of role. We probably want to look at it more closely. And obviously we're not going to conduct election negotiation at this point well before an election.
The Transport Minister, Simon Bridges. 2 mobile traders have been fined a total of more than $183,000 in order to return at least $71,000 in fees to customers. The Manukau-based truck shop Budget Warehouse has pleaded guilty in the Auckland District Court to 18 charges relating to its customer contracts. It sold household goods on credit in Auckland and Hamilton. The Commerce Commission says the company failed to disclose the required information in its contracts. A second company, Best Buy, faced 16 charges over problems with its contracts, which the Commission says were unclear and left out important information. It sold goods in towns around the North Island, and the sentencing judge called their failures widespread and systemic. A report assessing the most effective ways people can reduce their carbon footprint says public information campaigns are focusing on the wrong initiatives. The Swedish researchers say eating a plant-based diet, avoiding air travel, living without a car and having fewer children all substantially reduce carbon dioxide emissions. But actions promoted by many governments focus on lifestyle changes with a far smaller impact, such as recycling. The study found that a US family choosing to have one less child had the same impact as 684 teenagers committing to recycling for the rest of their lives. It's 6:05. In sport, New Zealand face the toughest challenge of their Women's Cricket World Cup so far when they play unbeaten hosts England in Derby tonight. The White Ferns are 4th on the competition ladder with 3 wins from 5 matches, while England lead pool play following their narrow 3-run win over defending champions Australia on Monday. Amy Satterthwaite will play her 100th one-day international for the White Ferns tonight and says England will be full of confidence.
Just their record in the last few games of late, they've obviously played some really good cricket, so I'm sure they'll be feeling positive and it'll be a great game of cricket again.
The match starts at 9:30 tonight. Beware of a scorned Jared Hayne is the warning from New South Wales coach Laurie Daly ahead of tonight's State of Origin Rugby League decider against Queensland in Brisbane. Daly says the star centre Hayne is out to prove he isn't a spent force after having possibly the worst game of his representative career in the Blues Game 2 loss 3 weeks ago.
I'm sure he would have been disappointed with some parts of his game. He did some really good things in Game 2, but there's a couple of areas there that I'm sure he'd like to improve. He's a great player and he's got that X factor and he'll be right.
The New South Wales coach Laurie Daly. The New Zealand tennis player Michael Venus will return to court tonight in a bid to reach the double semi-finals at Wimbledon. Before rain suspended play, Venus and his American partner Ryan Harrison were locked at 1 set all but trailed 4-3 in the third against the top seeds Henri Kontinen of Finland and Australian John Peers. That's the news.
Police defend their breath test strategy.
We're not after volume, we're after effect. And sometimes that'll mean reduce the number of people going through our checkpoint.
Will it work?
The reality is, having done a bit of fishing, the more time you've got your bait in the water, the more chance you've got of catching fish.
Road closures.
There's fresh snow squalls coming through, so we have people out ploughing and patrolling the roads.
Safe driving, morning report, weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, what does the liberation of Mosul, a former ISIS stronghold, mean for the future of the militant group? And after 10, leadership coach Diana Jones on motivating others and what it takes to be a good boss. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after morning report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, and severe weather warnings and watches are in force for heavy rain, snow and strong winds for central and eastern areas. Northland to Waitomo, including Coromandel, the Central High Country, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Showers, some heavy and possibly thundery from Waikato to Northland, easing in the south later tomorrow. Bay of Plenty in Gisborne, a few showers. Taranaki to Wellington, also Wairarapa. Occasional rain becoming persistent with heavy falls this evening. Snow lowering to 500 metres this evening. Southerly gales severe about Cook Strait. Marlborough and Canterbury, showers, snow above 200 metres. The showers will ease and the snow level will rise later tomorrow. Nelson, fine and cloudy periods, isolated snow showers about the eastern ranges. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, fine. Otago and Southland, showers, snow to 200 metres, easing and snow level rising tomorrow. And the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods with a few showers tomorrow. It's almost 6:09 on RNZ National and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina Batten. NZTA and the police in many parts of the country, and you know where those parts are, where there is snow and ice or heavy rain, really are asking you to take care on the roads. The conditions are foul in some places. I think they're going to get worse in Wellington and the centre of the country tomorrow. The big chill is certainly moving north. Hail and heavy rain is now falling in parts of the North Island after a wintry blast closed roads and stranded travellers in the lower South Island and inland Canterbury today. Inter-island ferries have been cancelled. Shortly we'll find out what the voyage was like for those brave enough to face a Cook Strait crossing when they were still going earlier today. But first, our reporter Rachel Graham on today's weather.
The snow started falling in the North Canterbury town of Oxford yesterday afternoon and continued all night. Kim Moore from Cruisy Days Diner says today has been very cold and the snow flurries aren't keeping people at home.
Surprisingly enough, there are people out and about, and we've already had bookings all morning for the diner, so we've got people coming up from town to see the snow and to come to our diner. So, we've already had people outside having snowball fights, so good fun.
In Canterbury, Porter's Pass remains closed, which also means that access onto Arthur's Pass is also closed. But NZTA says it may open to those with chains. State Highway 93 from Mataura to Clinton is shut as well. Lindis and Burke's Pass are open to those carrying chains. Those roads were closed yesterday afternoon, leaving Fairley in the Mackenzie district completely cut off. Tracy Harper from Aorangi Motels says that left lots of people who had planned to head on to Wanaka or Tekapo with nowhere to go.
I turned away probably about 15 cars. The other motels around here as well were the same deal. They had so many people driving in just looking for accommodation and big groups, which is really hard being ski season and holidays. You don't have many rooms available, so we just did what we could, and most of Fairley was full last night, I think.
In Dunedin, the snow and ice closed the main highway heading north out of Dunedin for a time, and the southern motorway into Dunedin was hugely backed up with cars at a standstill, some abandoned after failing to get up the hills in the icy conditions. Marianne Maslin says conditions in Dunedin were pretty treacherous this morning, but by midday it had turned into sludge.
There's been snow, there's been sleet, there's been hail, there's been rain, and one of everything really. It would have been probably a lot less worry about the traffic if people had driven to the conditions, because I've seen people doing, sort of burnouts and just ridiculous driving this morning.
At the Cust Hotel in North Canterbury, Thomas Dick has had a busy day looking after people who weren't able to make it into Christchurch due to the snow-covered roads.
The conditions are pretty drastic at the moment. We've got at least 6 inches of snow lying on the ground, and it's snowing quite heavily once again, so it's going to be a kind of treacherous night. It started early morning, went off round about 6 o'clock and then came back on again, and it's been snowing on and off ever since.
Mr Dick says his main concern is that the snow may become so heavy it brings down the power lines. But he says he'll keep his fingers crossed that doesn't happen and that the beer stays cold and the bar stays warm. The Met Service says after the snow there will be some heavy frosts and icy mornings for the lower South Island. But the worst of the weather is now making its way towards the lower North Island. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Rachel Graham.
Wellington Airport says Air New Zealand regional flights have been suspended due to the weather. That's just been announced. That's Wellington, so that's flights in and out of Wellington. I'm just looking now. Hamilton, Nelson, Blenheim, And, yeah, look, all the places the small planes go to out of Wellington or from those communities into Wellington cancel for the time being because of the weather. All inter-islander passenger ferries have been cancelled due to the rough weather. The Kaitaki was due to make the last scheduled sailing, leaving Picton at 2:45 this afternoon. Mark Thompson is the head of the inter-islander ferries and he joins us now. Are you there, Mark?
Yes, good evening, John.
Good evening. Where are you at the moment? Are you about to travel?
I'm enjoying the travelling back into Wellington out of Auckland, so I'm stuck up here at the moment.
Is your flight delayed? Are you going?
Yeah, apparently, but it's clearly problematic with everything else going on in Wellington at the moment.
Yeah, it looks like the big planes are still going in, which is the one you'll be on, but the little ones are certainly being cancelled. It's a wild old night. How's that ferry sailing? How's the Kaitaki? Is it into Wellington yet?
Yeah, she's into Wellington now. That sailing was the last one we scheduled today. Clearly the seas are getting rougher as the storm gets closer to the Cook Strait. So the storm actually arrived earlier than we forecast yesterday. So we were scheduled to pull sailings tonight, and we ended up pulling this afternoon's sailings as well. So it's a challenge, but the good news is she may get through earlier and therefore sailings may resume earlier, but that's still to be confirmed.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's better to be safe than sorry in the Strait, isn't it? So at the moment, when are you picking sailings will resume, or is it hard to say now?
We're scheduled to sail out of Wellington at 6:30 on Friday morning.
Okay.
But that's what's open, but we're looking around the corner. We think we'll go possibly earlier, but that's to be confirmed. So we know customers are sadly inconvenienced, and that's not what we want, but safety will always be our priority.
There's not terribly much you can do about it when it is just too foul and too dangerous to go out to sea, right? How do you make these decisions? Because we all know this piece of water is challenging much of the time. What leads you to call sailings off, to cancel them?
So we've got a hierarchy around the decisions. Clearly, we look at the forecast. We take the forecaster's advice. We use all the technology to predict what the seas are going to do. And then based on that, we can consult the masters, because it's ultimately the masters' call whether they'll sail or not. And by doing all that, we come to the final decision. There are regulations around how high the seas can be when we sail, particularly around the Cook Strait. So we are regulated in that area. We have restrictions around livestock and those sort of things. So, you know, there's a framework we work to that's all about safety and customer, satisfaction. So we just work through that and come to these decisions. And as I said today, we thought we were being cautious, and it still caught us out a bit. So. Yeah.
What's your advice to passengers who were booked on these sailings that have been cancelled?
Keep in touch with the call centre. Keep an eye out, look out the window. If it looks as though it's clearing, then that will suggest we'll sail earlier if possible. But just keep in touch with the terminals or the call centres.
Mark Thompson, who's head of the Inter-Island Ferries, hoping to fly from Auckland into Wellington tonight. His flight is delayed. Just looking, if you're hoping for a loved one to come home from Wellington this evening, flights to Invercargill, Blenheim, Rotorua and Hamilton have been cancelled out of Wellington, but some flights, still the big planes, are going. So do keep an eye on the Wellington Airport website. They will update you on the latest. Right, let's move on to quite a bizarre story. Freezing weather is pushing spot prices for electricity sky high. Prices that began rising a month ago shot up today to an average of around $300 a megawatt hour, and were forecast to peak in some locations at as much as $1,200 a megawatt hour. That is 8 times average prices yesterday and 24 times what prices were at this time last year. $1,200 a megawatt hour, 24 times up year on year. Most people have some form of protection from this, as big electricity companies typically set a bill at a fixed level for a year for ordinary households. But electricity retailer Flick Electric has 23,000 customers who are exposed to the spot market. However, the company's chief executive, Steve O'Connor, insists they can cope.
Most of our customers realise the model that they're on, so it does give them access to the wholesale spot market. Most of the time that market is very cheap, so a lot of our customers that have been with us recognise the very cheap prices they've had over time. They understand their position at the moment. They can see prices are higher, but what they do know is long run they're better off.
Flick customers may not agree right now, with comments on Facebook indicating a level of frustration. People will likely have to be disciplined about every light they switch on and never to put on the washing and the dishwasher at peak times, basically. But even so, Steve O'Connor insists, though, this is the way of the modern world.
It's a feature of the model. This is the reality, is that model shows our customers what's happening in the market. Most of the time that market is extremely favourable to them. They win on that basis, and they understand occasionally their bills might be a little bit higher. That's the situation there at the moment, but most of them are taking a mature long-term view to it.
So why have spot prices gone up? Well, in part, it's demand, of course, and also low water levels in the South Island hydro storage lakes, which have been aggravated by today's freezing weather. The government admits it's still weighing up the introduction of special economic zones, where laws could be bypassed to push through developments like coal mines and salmon farms. Officials told the government not to proceed with the zones because they would undermine both environmental safeguards and the social licence of already controversial projects. And critics say it's outrageous senior cabinet ministers are even contemplating suspending New Zealand law. Political reporter Benedict Collins has more.
Special economic zones could speed up investments and developments by overriding existing rules. The zones would have what officials call regulatory benefits that would streamline consenting, access to Crown land and resources, using the Public Works Act and potentially even immigration settings. Last year, the government asked Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment officials to investigate the merits of the zones. In March, they reported back, saying feedback from stakeholders was that the existing rules were adequate and the zones could undermine environmental regulations and exacerbate tensions surrounding controversial projects. They advised the Economic Development Minister, Simon Bridges, not to proceed. But Mr Bridges says he's still weighing it up.
Oh, yeah, I think we still talk about it. Certainly, I think it was advice that they have given, that some of what we're doing we should continue with. There's other parts that aren't worthwhile. That's still something that we discuss as ministers from time to time.
The environmental group Forest and Bird fears laws will be circumvented to push through developments such as coal mines and salmon farms. But Mr Bridges says special economic zones could help an array of projects to get off the ground.
Geothermal, aquaculture, tourism, ICT, and how we might provide bespoke solutions to regions where they have advantages. In relation to coal specifically, look, it's a very fraught issue, and that's because undoubtedly in areas such as the West Coast, it's been a mainstay of their economy. It has provided very strong job numbers and high-paying jobs at that. But of course, what is also true on the other side of that is that there's conservation values that we, as New Zealanders, hold very seriously.
But Forest and Bird's Chief Executive, Kevin Haig, says that gives him no comfort at all. He says it's disturbing that senior ministers are even contemplating setting up special zones when New Zealand laws won't apply.
The scope of law and regulation that the government is proposing to suspend to facilitate these developments is breathtaking. Forest and Bird is particularly concerned about relaxing or suspending environmental protection legislation and regulation, but I think that other New Zealanders might equally be concerned about tax law, immigration law, overseas investment law.
Labour's regional development spokesperson Stuart Nash says the government's determination to proceed and ignore official advice reeks of third-term arrogance.
Look, I'm all for regional economic development, of that there's no doubt. However, we have rules in place for a reason. You don't go breaking the rules. I mean, what sort of message does that send to ordinary good hard-working Kiwis if the government's prepared to break the rules? It's just not right.
Simon Bridges couldn't say when the government might make up its mind about whether or not to introduce the special economic zones. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Benedict Collins.
6:22, Bali's infamous Kirabakan prison is in the spotlight again, with a parliamentary committee demanding inmates, including foreigners, be moved out to stop overcrowding. 2 prisoners, including an Australian man who escaped from the prison last month, are still on the run. The committee is scathing its investigation into the escape, saying it's strongly suspected that the tunnel they used to escape was also a drugs channel. From Denpasar, the ABC's Indonesian correspondent Samantha Hawley has more.
3 weeks since they climbed through a 15-metre-long tunnel to walk free, Bali's police chief insists they're getting closer to apprehending the 2 prisoners still on the run. The reality is Indonesian authorities are now heavily relying on the work of Interpol. We're going to do a reenactment about how they ran away, Police Inspector General Petrus Goulis tells reporters. We've questioned more than 20 people and will announce a new suspect once the reenactment has finished. It's pretty clear now that the 4 prisoners who escaped had assistance from inside and outside. It's hardly new that the prison, once home to many Australians, including Schapelle Corby, is riddled with corruption and drugs. But a parliamentary committee from Jakarta has now toured the facility and emerged to express outrage. Its leader is Benny Harman. Because the hole is big and long, it could not be finished in 2 weeks. It would take months, and it's weird if the prison officers didn't know about it, he says. There's drug transactions inside prison, so we strongly suspect that this hole is the channel for drugs coming in and out. On the ground at any given time, there are only 4 guards patrolling the grounds and 4 guards in the 6 towers. The members of the Law Committee have demanded prisoners in Kerobokan be transferred to other facilities across the country, including Nusa Kambangan, known as Execution Island. But the reality is every prison in Indonesia is underfunded and overcrowded, with more than 80,000 drug offenders on the inside. Police in Bali have been angered by social media taunts in the name of the Australian Bali escapee Sean Davidson. We will transfer them to Nusa Kambangan so they can experience the discipline there together with the terrorism convicts, the police chief says. First, they need to find them.
That was Samantha Hawley, the ABC's reporter in Indonesia. It's 24, coming up to 25 past 6. Think of a petty criminal and an image of a wayward teenager, for example, might spring to mind, but in Japan, small-time thieves are just as likely to be grandparents. The share of crimes committed by the elderly in the country has risen dramatically in recent years. As more of these senior citizens actually get locked up, experts say the more Japan's prisons are turning into a form of nursing home. Here's the BBC's Edwin Lane.
This is the sound of a Japanese pop group with a difference. They're called KBG84, and the average member is in her 80s. That makes them part of a fast-growing demographic. Around the world, populations are getting older as people live longer and the birth rates decline. It's particularly a problem for developed economies. But nowhere is the population ageing faster than in Japan. Right now, the over 65s make up more than a quarter of Japan's population, and that's forecast to rise to a third in the next 15 years. And that's presenting all kinds of challenges. In particular, there are an increasing number of older Japanese people without enough money to support them after they stop working and nothing to do to occupy them in their retirement. And according to researchers, that's having a surprising consequence: a rise in the number of older people turning to a life of crime. Keiko, not her real name, is 69. She's slight and quietly spoken, and a few years ago she committed her first crime, stealing someone's handbag in a busy department store. She says she was desperate.
I wasn't getting along with my husband, so I ran away from home. I wanted to work, but I had nowhere to live. There was no other way for me but to steal someone's possessions.
What was the reaction of the other prisoners and of the police? Were they surprised to find that you were committing crime for the first time at such an old age?
Yes, of course. When I went to prison for the first time, there were mostly younger criminals. But these days, there are more older people, a lot more, because older people can no longer make a living from the state pension.
Keiko is not alone. Arrests among the elderly in Japan have doubled in the past decade. And the over 65s is the only age group where crime is actually rising.
In Japan, probably about a decade ago, 20% of pickpocketing was done by the elderly, that is people aged over 65, and that's now above 35 and rising.
Michael Newman is a researcher at a company called Custom Products Research in Tokyo. He's published a study into rising crime rates among the elderly. He says economic pressures are to blame.
If you look at the basic state pension, and that is not a lot to sort of get around on. So some of these people who don't want to put any burden on their families really think that getting put into prison means you get 3 square meals a day, you get free health care.
Prison's an attractive prospect to them, relatively speaking.
Prison offers free everything.
Oh, that's a fascinating report from Japan. Lots of feedback coming in from Flick customers, and it's not what you might expect. John is a Flick customer and not a PR person for anyone. I'm happy to ride the current high wholesale electricity prices. My savings getting into winter were over $500 since joining, still in the black. I value their great billing transparency and business models, so keen to stick with them. So they're still there come summer when, again, I'll be saving when low spot prices don't make the news. Sounds a little bit like something a PR person might write, but I'm taking you at your word on that. I am a Flick customer, this person says. My bills are still on average 20% lower than Contact. It's an excellent model if you can accept the peaks and troughs. Peaks at the moment, by golly, but those people saying that they are still better off as a result, including the person claiming not to be a PR agent. Let's look at the final Met Service weather warnings for this evening. Severe weather warnings, heavy snow warning, areas affected inland, mid and north Canterbury and the Kaikoura district. Forecast is snow expected through today, tonight and early tomorrow, easing late afternoon. Strong wind warnings if you're in the centre of the North Island, Wellington, Kapiti and the Marlborough Sounds, this is you. Southerly gales expected to become severe. That is coming, gusts of up to 140k, which is pretty strong, and from the south they will be cold too. Do keep an eye on the NZTA website for road closures if you're heading out and about, and if you have to drive in areas where there is likely to be ice, do take care. We hope to see you tomorrow night at 5. On behalf of the team, thank you for being with us, and a very good evening indeed.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Wellington Airport says Air New Zealand regional flights have been suspended due to the weather. All Inter-Islander and Blue Bridge ferry sailings have been cancelled as 7-metre-high waves pound Cook Strait. Motorists are being warned to plan ahead and only travel if they need to as the cold blast makes its way up the country. The police and the family of an Auckland woman say they're pleased with the guilty verdicts for the 5 men who caused her death. The government is not dismissing the Māori Party's scheme to get iwi involved in regional rail lines out of hand, but says it needs to be convinced of its economic viability. 2 mobile household goods traders have been fined more than $180,000 in order to return about $70,000 in fees to customers. And Forest and Bird says it's outrageous senior cabinet ministers